Welcome back to Secret Weapons. My name is Mark Johnston. If this is your first time here, this is a YouTube channel where we do gear demos and reviews, as well as studio tips and tricks for leveling up your writing, playing, and production from the perspective of a guitar player working out of a studio. If that's the kind of thing that would appeal to you, please hit that subscribe button and stick around for future videos. Today we are taking a look at the Concrete Sound Lab SLAB. So this is one of those interesting moments where I get to take a look at kind of a first offering from a new company. This is SLAB from Concrete Sound Lab, and it is the kind of debut pedal from what, based on my experience here, I'm hoping is a pretty promising new pedal builder. In my experience, SLAB is much more akin to a gritty, low-gain overdrive with admittedly some very lo-fi textures to it, but also excels at and is kind of, in my opinion, maybe at its sweet spot as a full-on distortion pedal. This thing goes from kind of edge of breakup, preampy gain stuff all the way up through, as you heard on that intro track, ripping, angular, angry sounding guitars that is as at home on 6-string guitars on conventional scale lengths as it is baritones and even bass sixes, going for some really angry moments. And beyond just sounding versatile and quite good, there's some really interesting approaches to the way that the SLAB is designed. You have your gain and your level on the right side of the pedal. That's going to be, of course, output of the device, as well as gain range going from low gain to big, smooth, angry distortion and fuzz textures. You have high and low EQ controls, as well as a tone control. And so those low and high EQs are going to be ahead of the gain in this pedal. So that two-band EQ is going to impact how hard your signal hits the clipping in the pedal. Conversely, that tone control is going to be a low-pass filter right ahead of the output of the pedal. And so what you can do there is lean back on those low and high controls for that kind of low gain, lo-fi preamp sound, or you can really push those lows and highs through that distortion circuit, creating angry, spitty, angular stuff, and then soothe out the kind of fizziness and hissiness of that high end with that tone control without adjusting or modifying the actual gain stage of the pedal. And beyond all that, you also have a boost control down here in the bottom left with its own foot switch. And that boost control is going to be an additional gain stage ahead of the kind of start of the pedal, allowing you to hit that main gain stage much harder. What's so interesting is that it's not just that boost control, that gain control, and those low and high controls all have an impact on the amount of gain available in this pedal. It's that they all voice the gain in this thing differently. With low and noon at high, that gain feels pretty true to form, pretty flat and accurate to what you are putting into it, just with this kind of preampy flavor. You introduce that boost control and you get a kind of thicker mid-range, not a more present mid-range, mind you, but a more present and kind of almost stacked in amount of gain, something that tightens things up a little bit. Conversely, if you push that low up, you get a much boomier distortion. And if you push that high up, you get a more hi-fi, and you really do away with a lot of that lo-fi quality. There are a variety of ways to get a great sound out of this thing, regardless of whether it's a lo-fi sound, a clean sound, an edge of breakup kind of dusty amp sound, or full-on smooth ripping distortion. So if you have not heard of Concrete Sound Lab before now, I highly recommend you go check out SLAB. Let's go ahead and put this thing back in our signal chain and give it a listen. So as always, before we get into our sound samples, let's talk through our signal chain and the context we are working in. I am playing my Fender 52 reissue Telecaster into the SLAB. We're going into the Benson Tallbird Plus with both effects bypassed into the Benson Monarch Plus amplifier. We're recording with a C414 mic into the Warm Audio WA273 microphone preamp. We're recording in Pro Tools. This is what our clean tone sounds like. So as you can hear, pretty clean, pretty straightforward. We have all knobs at noon and the boost disengaged. Let's give a listen to the SLAB. So as you can hear, there's a lot of gain from the jump right here. Let's go ahead and start by taking a walk through that gain range. So let's go ahead and take a look at the EQ section of this pedal. There's a really interesting approach here with the low and high controls being an obvious two-band EQ that are pre-clipping stage, which means as you boost or cut the low and high controls, they are going to increase and decrease the amount that those frequency bands are hitting the clipping stage, and therefore adjusting the overall amount of gain and distortion in the pedal. The tone control, by contrast, is post-gain ahead of the output of the pedal, and it is a high-pass filter where at fully clockwise like it is right now, you're getting no tone adjustments whatsoever, but you can use it to kind of progressively tame down brittle highs as needed. So we're going to start by taking a look at those low and high controls and use that tone control as kind of necessary to kind of keep things tame and amenable for a recording context. As you can hear, not only does rolling that high end back kind of darken the tone up, which is to be expected, but you're also getting less gain. And that tone control is really beneficial in these contexts, because if you want a little bit more of that bite and grit and more gain by boosting those highs, you can keep it from getting too out of control with that tone control. finally, let's take a look at this boost control, which is a boost that kind of has a FET quality at the input stage of the slab, which will allow you to kind of not only obviously get more gain out of the gain control, but also will change the character of that gain, as well as obviously offering you a second gain stage without having to reach down and adjust anything. The boost is modeled after Concrete Sound Lab's Mad Amps boost channel, and yeah, is really useful for thickening up and emphasizing frequencies in a different way. So let's give it a listen.